Now let's return to the appalling decision by Albanese to reward Hamas this week with unconditional recognition of a Palestinian state. In a wave of media interviews, the Prime Minister angrily insisted his plan was the opposite of what Hamas would want.
And Hamas, I've seen some of the comments that have been made about Hamas somehow being rewarded. Hamas is opposed to two states. This is the opposite of what Hamas wants. Hamas will be totally opposed to this decision. Hamas do not want this. Hamas don't want two states.
So Albanese resolutely claiming that Hamas would hate his decision to recognise a sovereign Palestinian state. Yet that wasn't true at all. Because while Hamas does not want a two-state solution, it does want a Palestinian state from which to destroy Israel and all Jews. The Sydney Morning Herald yesterday quoted a senior Hamas figure praising Albanese for political courage. And just as Hamas was praising Albanese, we heard criticism from the United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. So absurd is this twisted foreign policy that Greg Sheridan today wrote in The Australian, "This is a brilliant, distinctive, surely unique accomplishment for any Australian Prime Minister. Lauded as the friend of the worst terrorists in the world, dismissed as a cynical domestic opportunist by the US Secretary of State, the most moderate and pro-Australian figure in the administration that governs our greatest ally." Now, Albanese could have responded to this by coming out today and apologising for playing into the terrorists' playbook and for being so terribly insensitive to the victims of October 7. But he didn't. Instead, he doubled down, apologies, and tried to claim that Hamas didn't really feel this way. Have a look.
I notice in the statement that's made today, they say that the alleged statement from the person yesterday is someone who's been in prison in Israel since October 2023 and has no means of communication. What that should be is a warning to the media of being very careful about the fact that Hamas will engage in propaganda, because what is happening is the international community are united about isolating Hamas.
Now, that was Albanese grasping at straws because there is ample proof that Hamas does want Palestinian recognition and is taking credit for it. Now, sure, the Hamas figure the Herald quoted is in jail, as another terrorist said in a statement today, but the Herald clarified the statement they received was from Hassan Yousaf's office in the West Bank, still from a Hamas spokesman. And Albanese's denials further backfired because more Hamas terrorists came out to heap praise on his brave move to recognise a Palestinian state. And I'm quoting from the ABC now. In a statement by Hamas to the ABC, the terror group applauded the Albanese government's decision to recognise a Palestinian state. And then another Hamas official also welcomed the move. And despite Albanese's indignant denials, Hamas has been issuing statements applauding nations who recognise a Palestinian state for weeks. Exhibit 1. On July 25th, when Macron said he'd recognise a Palestinian state, the BBC reported, and I'm quoting here this in the BBC, Hamas said France's decision was a positive step in the right direction. Pretty definitive. Albanese should have known that Hamas would welcome his move. Now here's Exhibit 2. Apologies, I've had the flu this week, the actual influenza A, hard to shake. Now Exhibit 2, Hamas official Ghazi Hamed speaking to Al Jazeera a week and a half ago.
7 أكتوبر هذه الضربة القوية التي وجهت إلى إسرائيل أنا أعتقد أعطت 3 إنجازات تاريخية كبيرة جدا. أول شيء إن هي أعادت القضية الفلسطينية. اليوم ليش كل الدول، أعطيني بس أقول لك مثل، ليش كل الدول أصبحت تعترف بفلسطين الآن؟
So there's all of this evidence, and you can see how Albanese was desperately clutching at straws this morning when he claimed one single Hamas terrorist was in jail and therefore the terror group couldn't possibly support his foreign policy, when in fact they've made their position extremely clear over the past 3 weeks. And Albanese cannot escape the fact that he has rewarded the world's most bloodthirsty terror group for its massacre of 1,200 innocent people. And what's more, this isn't the first time Hamas has praised the Albanese government. Back in December 2023, just 2 months after October 7, Hamas thanked the Albanese government for shifting away support from Israel by voting for a United Nations resolution calling for a ceasefire. And then in July, Hamas also welcomed that multinational declaration signed by Australia urging Israel to stop its military campaign in Gaza. So this week is now the third time Hamas has applauded Albanese's decisions. How proud he must be. But let's go back to Albanese claiming this is all Hamas propaganda. Have a look again.
Well, what I say is that they shouldn't repeat Hamas's propaganda because it is Hamas which will engage in propaganda.
It's just like Jacinta Allen attacking the media for this. But can you believe our Prime Minister is now asking us not to believe Hamas propaganda when he sprouts it all the time? Whether it's drawing on claims from the Hamas Health Ministry about the number of deaths, or from the Hamas Communications Ministry, the propaganda that Israel is deliberately killing or starving civilians or depriving Palestinians of aid. Now, this is a very good point that Israeli Ambassador to Australia, Amir Maimon, made today.
Calling out Hamas propaganda is right. Doing it only when it suits politics is not. Hamas always lie about casualty numbers, about hiding in hospitals and schools, and about who really puts Gazans at risk. Truth is not selective.
He's so right. And the bottom line is that none of this helps Israel bring the hostages home or defeat the terrorists, both of which would end the war. Now, there was only one Australian brutally murdered on October 7, Galit Carbone, a grandmother. She was killed while hiding in her safe room in kibbutz Be'eri. I've been there. Her brother, Danny Masner, who I met in person when I was in Israel, told me today that he feels sick to see Albanese's rush to recognise a Palestinian state. Have a look.
Hi, Sharri. Thanks for having me from my home at Kibbutz Hatzerim near Be'er Sheva in Israel. Once upon a time, I used to think that Australia was one of our best and closest allies, after the States, obviously. But suddenly, since the October 7th event, I feel like 180 degrees has changed between Israel and Australia and the Labour government. I've got no idea why, but it's like really giving the Hamas a prize for doing what they did by creating the worst tragedy and attack on civilians. What he's actually doing is taking Yahya Sinwar, who was head of the Hamas in Gaza, and putting him up on the ladder of the gods, because in his grave now he sees that he achieved what he was trying to achieve by force, and now it's going to come from the front door via politicians, via cheap politics. And Mr. Albanese, I really don't understand, seriously, what's the rush? We are really, to say the least, not happy, Mr. Albanese. Rethink your vote next time when you go to the UN Assembly. Please. If we're still allies, let's keep it this way.
Doesn't Danny put it powerfully when he said there that Yahya Sinwar, the former head of Hamas who was killed, would be pleased in his grave to see that the terror attacks he was a mastermind of have led to foolish Western nations now voting to recognise a Palestinian state unconditionally. This is such a deep source of shame for Australia. And I think this time, in aligning himself with barbaric terrorists rather than our allies in the United States, well, our Prime Minister might have just gone too far.